I'm Curt Doty. Welcome to RealmIQ sessions, where we talk about AI with various business leaders, AI experts, and our RealmIQ mentors. In this session, I'm talking with Lane Kinkade, Professor of User Experience Design at SCAD, Savannah College of Art and Design. Lane, welcome, and please elaborate on your distinguished career, and let's talk about AI. How you doing?
I'm doing great, Curt. Thank you so much for having me. I've listened to a lot of your podcasts and found them really engaging, and feel like I got some big shoes to fill, but I'll try my absolute best. My background, I think, kind of follows a lot of UX designers in that I predate the term UX. So back in the day, graphic designers, as you have had a lot of experience, Curt, were expected to kind of do everything back in the day, and now over time, there's been these more specialist roles. I was a graphic designer for about 8 to 10 years, then went to graduate school at your recommendation, Curt. And I'm very glad that I did because while I was in graduate school, they had a newly created UX program. I was a guinea pig. I was the first of two graduates in this brand new program. Don't know if they really knew what they were doing, but I ended up getting something out of it. So, I think that's worth something. After graduating with my MFA, I started working at Jaguar Land Rover, and I worked specifically on their autonomous driving team. So, Jaguar Land Rover's aging demographic was, a little bit skeptical with some of this new technology. So, totally different audience than Tesla. So they required a lot more UX hand holding, an empathetic approach to feeling more comfortable with the idea of a vehicle driving itself. So I worked with them for a little over a year and a half on both their self parking and their autonomous driving features, which are just now coming out now. That's
Yeah,
how
I haven't
long.
heard too much about them, so it's interesting
No,
how long it
five,
takes, right?
5 years. No, actually, yeah, 6 years it's been. So
Wow.
that's the life cycle in the automotive industry. It's slow moving unless you're at the forefront like Rivian or Tesla. So after that I wanted to pivot to something that was a little bit more tech, because I for a long time I thought, okay, if I'm working on an autonomous driving team, a Jaguar Land Rover, I'm working in tech. Found out no, it's still the automotive industry, slow moving, slow to adapt. So I was hired as a lead UX designer at Ubiquity, which is it was a kind of a faction company that splintered off of Apple. The CEO, Joe Pera, I'm sorry, Robert Pera, he had splintered off of Apple as their lead network designer and started doing everything smart home network, commercial networking applications. They had just had a team of nothing but developers,
Mhm.
no UX designers. So he was wondering why aren't my systems performing? Why don't people like this? And it was just
Gee, I
developers
wonder
designing,
why. Yeah.
right? Exactly, right. Developers designing for developers. And so when I started working there, I was the first to introduce personas, usability testing. They had done none of these things before. So it was kind of fun to build this program from the ground up.
Yeah.
I was there for 3 years before the branch that I was at pivoted to working on marketing.
Mhm.
So it was my time to move on, and so I moved to Viva, which was a really interesting company at the time. Viva was digitizing and bringing tech UX into clinical trials when COVID was coming out. So we were, there was a lot of pressure to streamline clinical trial process to get vaccines out quicker, because the medical field is so shockingly disorganized and old fashioned. For how many highly intelligent, hardworking people that are in that field, it seemed like that there was some missing pieces, and so Viva fulfilled that business goal. And so I think a big part of uh, why clinical trials were able to go through faster was due to companies like Viva bringing a kind of UX design thinking to clinical trials. So after working at Viva for about a year and a half, I was contacted by SCAD, and they said, "Hey, we don't have any UX professors. We've been looking to hire one for 5 years here at the Atlanta campus. Are you willing to meet with us?" It went really well, and that's kind of when now I've pivoted to being the person making the product to now making the makers that make the product.
Yeah, no,
And it's been kind of nice.
that's fantastic. It's things come full circle, right? You were mentored, probably by many teachers and employers over your career. And now you get to give back and be that mentor. And I remember when I was making that transition from designer to creative director, because oh yeah, creative directors, they make more money and they're autonomous with their design, with a little client input, but my current boss at that time said, you know what you're giving up, right? By being a creative director, it's like, you're now, the stars are going to be the designers working under you, and you kind of have to kind of accept that fact that you're now mentoring other people, not just thinking about yourself. Not that I was selfish before. I've always been fairly selfless. But yeah, that's a distinction. It's like, yeah, you're like helping the next generation. So congrats. I think the school, which I love the school, by the way, I recruited from there. My son went there, graduating in graphic design, is doing very well. So yeah, I think they got a good one with you. So I'm glad you're there, and I'm glad we're talking today. And we want to talk about AI because I think it has a significant impact on not only education and higher education in general, but how is it affecting user experience design? And I'd love to get your top level thoughts, and let's get into it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, my background with AI probably started when I was in grad school, so probably about 7 years ago. There were some really new features that were happening that I was learning about on Reddit, and they were very basic. It was like, using AI to blend two different images. So you have a selfie and you blend it with old Zelda Super Nintendo game to create this kind of unique image. It was fun. It was a gimmick that got you excited for about an hour or two, and then you lost interest pretty quickly. It never felt like there was a professional application of that. Fast forward to starting to explore DALL-E and some of the really earlier versions of that. You were doing the text to image generation, which I was absolutely fascinated by. But as you know, the fidelity was still a gimmick. It wasn't anything that I was thinking, wow, this is something I could use. Fast forward to obviously Chat GPT being a huge resource that I have been dealing with a lot with school, and I'll get into that in a second. But I thought I'll give you a little background with my experience with AI. But I also consider myself, just like I know you do, an image maker, right? So I yes, UX is my profession, but illustration and graphic design are my passion that support that a lot. So when I finally started generating some higher fidelity stuff with Midjourney, I had this moment where I'm like, oh, wow, okay. I'm able to generate these high fidelity images that are really high caliber. And it's just continued and snowballed, and the technology is the crazy thing about AI, and I know you know this really well, is the changes are exponential. So back when we needed to keep up with Illustrator and Photoshop making updates, that was totally feasible to ride that little wave that was coming by. Now, if you aren't super active and very observant about all these changes, you could easily just get passed by with all these things. So never has it been more important to stay on top of things. And I think that's what I really love about your podcast. It's always riding this big exponentially growing wave. So this wave has now crashed into academia. I brought this up when I first started, back when the earlier versions of a lot of these text to image, as well as Chat GPT came out, I brought this up to head faculty. Um, they didn't necessarily see the application, so they weren't really concerned at the time, or maybe they didn't feel like the fidelity was something that was something that they were worried about with plagiarism. But now it's a real issue. Every every essay that is submitted, I have to run things through checkers to ensure that it was their original work. And that was what I did at the beginning. And then I thought, okay, do I really think that them writing essays are the most effective way to absorb this information? No, no. So instead of me being a plagiarizer checker, which I didn't want to do anyway, because being a cop is my least favorite part of the job. So I started adapting. So instead of doing essays about the reading, I would encourage them to do infographics or data visualization to summarize what they learned in a visual way. So they're building their design skills and they're showing critical thinking through presenting the information in a more engaging way and getting, better at being a designer. So long story short, it seems like AI becomes this game of whack-a-mole where I'm constantly having to stay on top of it and not just reacting, but trying to be proactive with approaches that make the learning engaging and accepting that we are living in this and not putting my head in the sand and pretending like it's not happening, which unfortunately that is some of the academic leadership's policies is they're not really acknowledging it, or maybe they think it's a fad, or or maybe they're just trying to ban it outright because they don't see it as a resource.
Yeah, they can't ban it. It's here, and
Mm-hmm.
I've had other guests and mentors on the show who are working with universities, not in UX or creative, but in history and journalism and writing and our discussions were really about, okay, maybe it's not about a written presentation which reinforces rote memorization, right? And which is not really the way to learn these days. And discussing a movement towards a more Socratic method of education where it's like, yeah, use the internet, use ChatGPT, do your research. There's all these tools out there. They're wonderful. But guess what? You're going to give an hour-long dissertation on what you've learned with these tools. And if they're supercharging you to make you a fantastic student, well, then prove it in the way you talk and discuss certain subject matter. And to me, that's one of the ultimate tests. I love the fact that you're making your UX students do infographics because that's another language, right? Another way to express yourself. So I love that solution. But I just believe that the higher education is headed towards, if they're not already in a crisis, because one, this denial, two, how do we teach our children? And which has needed to be challenged for a long time, because I have certain opinions about our educational systems. I believe in higher education, but we're not putting out the brightest minds out there. If you can tell by what's happening with our country. But that's another subject, is politics. But yeah, so now in terms of the practicality, Figma has some generative AI features. Have you been playing with Figma in terms of AI?
Yes. Oh,
Yeah, I'd love to hear that, because I have a team of Figma designers, so I'm not in Figma myself, so I can't
yeah.
speak to it because I'm learning all the other platforms and using them in my other work. But I'd love to get your POV on Figma, because I love Figma and I think, fantastic. Ironically, we had an Adobe event in Santa Fe, New Mexico last night.
Really?
Yeah, they came to Santa Fe of all places, and I thank them so much. But they were
It's a
talking.
very creative place. So,
It
I
is,
get it.
but it's just not on the radar of most people. So very thankful to have Adobe come. But they were talking about Adobe Firefly and the new things that are happening, which video is the next frontier. See what happens with video on Adobe Firefly. But please, let's talk about Figma.
Yeah, I'd love to talk about Figma. I'd love to talk about Firefly, and I'd love to talk about Runway, which is the text to video or image to video platform that I use. But I'll start with Figma. So I had a moment when Figma conference happened over the summer. That's when they announced their generative AI features. So I had probably spent in my previous roles, I'm going to go on a limb and say like 3 consecutive years. If that off all I'm doing 9 to 5 is just creating assets, building master library things, buttons. Every platform I've ever worked on, I don't use community libraries. I don't buy packs. I design my systems completely from the ground
Yeah.
up. Every icon, every color, everything is done with entirely bespoke custom intent. Then they came out with they had the Figma conference where they announced the generative AI, and I thought, wow, years of my life now
Yeah.
just sealed up. And I'm sure you've probably felt the same way, because I know you have a rich background as a technical illustrator. To then see some of these things that are going to be completely disrupted, and I know that you were there kind of at the beginning of the kind of digital shift from
Yeah.
physical illustration to digital. And I'm sure there was a moment that you had where you're like, wow, okay, this changes some things.
Oh,
And
yeah.
maybe it happened in little doses, but I'm sure you'd probably agree that these are even bigger, radical,
Huge
exponential
spikes. They're
changes.
not even hockey sticks.
No.
They're 90-degree charts that go
it's
straight up on the innovation curve. So yeah, it's amazing.
it's extreme. And so I'd done a lot of even as a freelancer now over the summer, I picked up some projects where graphic design teams are looking to pivot into being UX designers. So they needed master libraries built as a kind of foundation in Figma. So I would be doing this and bidding these out, and now I don't imagine that I'm going to be getting a lot of those gigs anymore. So a part of me is always excited about change. I'm not resisting it, but I've seen a big decrease in the demand for some of my graphic design and illustration freelance services.
Mhm.
So it's been interesting. I feel for both sides of the change, but I'm not resisting it at all. So there was a moment when Figma had the generative piece where I thought, okay, wow, all that production work that I've really gotten good at, well, that's not going to be as important. But then I took a moment and I thought, what do I really love about UX? It's not sitting there pixel pushing every single day and doing these productions. It's these exciting moments where I'm in meetings and we're pitching these ideas and we're being inventive and we are figuring out these interactions and talking to our customers. And I realized, you know what? When this part of my role is gone, I don't think I'm really going to miss it. So it's an amazing tool. Granted, it's changed how I've operated my business as a freelancer, but I'm really excited about it.
Yeah, cool. The notion that production is now not necessary. I think these tools enable people, no matter what business you're in, to possibly elevate to a higher level of thinking and higher level of output. And that's always a good thing. That's what you are always striving for in a career as a graphic designer, is like, yeah, I want to get out of the production. I want to go into the concept, right? And so this is eliminating production, which means if you're a UX leader on a team, then you're going to act naturally at a higher level because you don't have to bother with that lower level production art stuff. And so I think it's accelerating people's careers. I believe if you have the right mindset and are willing to accept, yeah, I'm not really supposed to be doing production because I've done that for 10 years, and it's like now I'm going to the next level. And people and jobs and corporations still need leadership. Okay.
Hmm.
So leadership not only in your vocation, which is user experience design, graphic design, but now AI leadership. And part of what we're doing with RealmIQ is, building AI operations for companies, advising them that it's not about hiring a chief prompt engineer. That's BS,
Hmm.
because that's a C-suite level who's just going to write prompts. That's ridiculous. So it's really, how does AI infuse your entire operation, and also keeping it human centered. You know, you and I know about human centered design thinking, as that applies to UX, but now there needs to be a human centered AI operation that lives within these corporations, because uh, the opportunity with this new technology is we need to focus on it being human centered. So we keep the humans, we keep jobs or create jobs. And so, I call this a human centered AI operation, because you, yes, this individual might have commanded an expertise multimodal across these different platforms. But it's a human at the center of that. It's the human who's saying, I need to solve this problem. I'm going to use these different platforms to solve my problem. There isn't a one-stop shop that solves the problem. So that conductor in one's own work moves into an operational role, and then interacts with other departments to determine where is the AI implementation, company wide, or start with one division. Marketing is obviously the first, and build that AI operation. So I think that's the opportunity, and that's what's going to create a higher adoption curve. As the technology curve, is going straight up, the adoption curve is not. But CEOs, the majority of them are exploring and accepting, but they don't know exactly what to do. So really, it's within these organizations finding the evangelists, being an AI advocate within your company, within your school, to not only build awareness, but build plans and curriculum and best practices, including ethics, and doing innovation for good versus always thinking about the bad things you can do with this technology, which there's a lot of bad actors out there. But how do you combat all that by just being highly productive in a good sense, and being a textbook example of, hey, you've transformed our company, our school, because of your advocacy. And that's the pivot that we're at literally right now. With the White House now releasing some guidelines, some guardrails. It's very interesting, because yes, red tape will increase, and it will decrease this innovation curve, because certain companies will feel handcuffed. But let's just look back in history. I always like to look back in history. So we didn't have guardrails when social media came out. We didn't have guardrails when NFTs came out. We didn't have guardrails when crypto came out. And look at all the disaster, that happened from that. Sam Bankman-Fried, whatever his name is, just got convicted of fraud yesterday. Yeah, that could have been prevented had there been guardrails and regulation. So here we are with AI. Huge, wide implications. Not everyone bought crypto. Not everyone bought NFTs. Not everyone was on social media. AI affects every business, every interaction with a computer screen moving forward, revolutionizing search. So here we are, regulations at the beginning within a year. So I think it's a good thing. And it needed to happen because I don't want this to fail, right? You can see
Yeah.
the benefits. The benefits are immediate. I saw it when I started playing ChatGPT. I go, this is going to be ubiquitous. It's going to be led by big tech. That's okay, because they have the money, the deep pockets, but it will be ubiquitous. It'll be in every piece of software application on your phone and in your computer, and you can see it happening with Adobe, with Microsoft, with Google. It's now, there's a little text box that says, can I generate something for you? That's, and people now just accept it, right? Which also changes what is the future of UX. I've written about it in a lot of my blogs. As this now goes conversational, what does that mean for interface design? What's your point of view on that? What is the future of UX based on things that are happening with conversational AI?
So I'm encouraging my students to do this. Multiple students I already have projects focused on this. I'm encouraging them, if you want to be future proofing your portfolio and not having it be completely out of date in 2 years by the time you graduate, you need to have some thought about this sort of conversational UI, that more human touch. That's something that should be happening from the very beginning. That's core to what UX is, right? In my definition, UX is an effective UX designer is the liaison between a human audience and a powerful and robust technology, right? So it's almost like a service industry where you are bridging that gap. So why ask somebody to understand that put the burden on their user to have to understand some convoluted jargony technology when you can speak to them in the language that they prefer? So it's core to our job anyway. So besides, I mean, I could talk all day about the tools that I think UX designers use, but I think the other thing that they can offer their users is that sort of very human touch to the UX. My students, I encourage them to use ChatGPT. I'm like everything that you kind of already talked about with the newer technology and all of these tools. My expectations, my standards raise up and up and up. So I encourage my students to storyboard using Midjourney. I love sketching, and I would love to dedicate the time to teaching my students how to effectively sketch out a storyboard with the human story that's happening with the product. Or I could teach them how to use Midjourney, and they could spend less time sketching and more time creating the better experience. So at the end of the day, I have to make some of these difficult decisions for a craft that I love, drawing and sketching, in the place of creating these storyboards, which can be a really effective way of getting client buy-off early. So instead of spending 2 weeks designing a product, putting in front of a client, finding out that you were totally off base, you could create a storyboard in the matter of an hour, present it to them and say, is this what you're looking for? Get buy off before you've even started breaking ground on anything. So there's a tremendous amount of tools that I think are going to be continually added. DALL-E 3's new Chat GPT integration, which I'm sure you're fully aware of, now is taking this to be a much more human, much more conversational piece, which I think that's going to be the big pivot from text to image AI being text to image generation being something that's more for early adopters, to being something that my grandparents, my parents, would be interested in using, because they're not going to need to understand prompt engineering or parameters or any of this stuff under the hood. They could just ask them in a very conversational tone and get what they want. And now with text too, right? Before, if you had wanted to have anything with a logo or text, or my band poster, they're playing this Friday, it wouldn't generate that properly. now. That's changing, and I'm worried about the future of graphic design. I think maybe it's time for
Yeah.
graphic designers
Let's
to
talk.
start
Let's
jumping
talk
on the
about
UX
that.
bandwagon.
Let's talk
Yeah,
about that because um, I haven't truly seen, you know, great results for logo or identity design yet. I've seen treatments, right? You can take a
yes.
logo and then treat it, render it in different ways. Some of this is, Adobe was showing last night. But, that classic mark, I I'm just not convinced yet that you could create something that's ownable, trademarkable, comes from some type of metaphorical source, origin. And I mean, what have you found?
You're right. We can't yet. Uh, DALL-E 3 is still closed alpha. When it becomes open, I believe in December, open beta. Do I believe that it'll be replacing logos? Not yet. But you can have live text in there. You can create marks, and maybe at the end of the day, there still will be the need of a logo designer who is somebody that understands the metaphor, that understands how to kern things just perfectly to have that nice typography. But I think even now, gone are the days where a logo designer is sitting down and doing 60 different drafts by hand and then narrowing those down and presenting them to clients. I think what you're going to do is you're going to quickly generate these, turn these around. That's going to be ballpark. So the clients like they'll have the ability to latch on to something and be like, that looks great. And then it's just going to be a matter of the logo designer making small edits and refinements to get the higher production. I think we're really close to that. Yeah, so I am worried about it. I think that like you mentioned, the production is going to be going down. That being said, you bring up a really good point, right? Like logos have there's a deep human symbolic representation behind some of these marks, um, that really AI is still a little bit behind the curve of being able to speak in those fuzzy, abstract, human symbolic kind of logic. Um, but we're not far off. So I worry about the students that I have now because I also teach graphic design, who are sophomores who will be graduating in 2 years when these things are going to be much more common. And so if you're looking for like a band poster or promotion for your event, or even a small to medium business looking for a logo and a branding system, are you going to pay somebody the same price that you used to, five grand for a junior
Five
production designer?
grand. Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Uh,
Or
um,
are you going to generate something and for a lot less money? So I think the tough thing is that they're going to have to compete at a kind of a little bit of a lower rate.
yeah, that's a very interesting notion that has far-reaching applications beyond graphic design. Because think of the agency model. When we worked together, and we
Mhm.
did work together,
Mhm.
that was based on hourly billing towards a client, right? And you would get a majority of the design hours. I'd try to hobble in there some a couple of creative direction hours, so I didn't break the budget. But it was all about billable hours, right?
Right.
So now, think about businesses with billable hours, lawyers, right? Uh, if the client says, "Oh, you're using AI now," it's like, well, that job should take half the time, right? That's the statistics that are showing. So you're going to charge me half as much, right? And it's that's going to happen, or if it's not already happening. And so what is the creator's response, the designer's response, the lawyer's response to that? And I believe it should be, yeah, we use AI. AI is ubiquitous at this point, just like the internet and access to the internet and Google, that became ubiquitous. What you're getting with my services, I can be more productive for you. it's not about doing things for less. It's about thinking on a higher level, leveling up, and being of more value to you as a client than you just pettily saying, well, you can do it for cheaper, right? You will have those clients, but you want to find clients who still see the value in you and recognize the fact that, hey, AI has supercharged me to work harder for you. And I think that's the point of view that service providers, graphic designers we're providing a service, lawyers are providing a service. Yes, there's billable hours, but there's going to be this transition and a different way of thinking about business and the value that we add to our clients. And so the last thing I want, is a race to the bottom. It was hard enough when Fiverr came around. And yeah, logo, $75. You can get it from Pakistan. And
Mhm.
I use Fiverr. There's certain things that certain clients don't have a budget and I need an effect scene or something for a trailer, and I go, okay, I'm gonna sub it out to someone literally in Pakistan, and they do a fantastic job for a really reasonable price. But that certainly took a dent in the market for graphic design and many creative services that are offered on Fiverr. AI has really taken it down and created a dip in the need and demand. So I think from an educational perspective, from a professional perspective, selling services, I think there needs to be a pivot to admitting that, hey, we're supercharged now. I don't have to hire a copywriter now to do your job. I'm a copywriter anyway, but I can now do all the copy for you, and I can do the graphic design, I can do the branding, everything that means, which means it's a better value for you as a client. So don't talk to me about cheaper. It's like it's faster, more effective, and a human-centered approach that is more effective for you, Mr. or Mrs. Client. So, I think these are painful realities that are going to happen in the real workforce. So we'll see what happens, but that's my agenda, is to push that away from a race to the bottom, but more of a race to the top, being a supercharged graphic designer, a supercharged creative director, supercharged copywriter, and I'm giving more value to my clients, and that's the attitude. That I don't want to even talk about the race to the bottom. I just don't want to even entertain it. And so I'm hoping that you can impart that to your students who are worried about what is it going to be like 2 years from now. And if you can be pumping out these supercharged big thinkers, highly elevated tacticians as it relates to various fields that graphics and UX touches, I think those are fantastic people to have within AI operations within companies 2 years from now. So I think that's the future. And there are, Biden said this week, Monday, it's like, we're going to be hiring AI trained people to help us with this. So that's a whole workforce, just like Civilian Conservation Corps, the Civilian Climate Corps that he did. So, there's recognition that there is a workforce for AI powered people.
Yeah, but wow. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I really like that message to my students. Do you mind if I ask you a question real quick?
Oh yeah, sure.
Oh, wonderful. What advice would you say, or what advice would you give to these students that'll be graduating in a couple years, so they could advocate for themselves in this kind of new reality that you defined?
Well, I think having great advocates like you as professors and teachers is the first step, but I think the students need to take it upon themselves to embrace it. It shouldn't be something that their teacher says you need to do this. The students need to embrace the future in a way that the teachers can't even begin to track. It's hard to keep track of all the advances, but I think that excitement and fervor that the students need to have needs to inspire the other students around them. I mean, when I was in art school, I was so inspired by the level of talent that was surrounding me and making me better. And that was just pure talent. This is before computers, dating myself here, but it was so inspirational. So how can these students become inspirations for each other and increase that competition curve where everyone's going, oh my God, I have to be as good as that person because they're all over the AI thing and look at their work. Oh my God, I got to get to that level. So art school is all about internal competition. When you get out into the workforce, it's even more competitive because now you're competing for jobs. So I think that rivalry has to start now, and students should be inspiring each other. Yes, top-down inspiration from the faculty, professors, but it really needs to come from the students. And I think they're generally excited because they don't have all the prejudices and habits that certainly you and I have growing up old school. So they're sponges that can absorb the stuff, and they're going to be the ones that take it to the next level. So I think that prepares them for that within that 2-year gap, so that when they graduate in 2 years, they're at the top of their game, not only in graphic design and UX design, but also automation, higher level thinking, and they could walk out into higher roles than they used to before. If production is eliminated, okay, you're not going to start as a production artist or doing iconography, right? For a job, you could graduate and start as a high level thinker. And what's wrong with that? I mean, that's a fantastic position because there's going to be legacy people out there in the workforce. They look at, hey, these SCAD students that are coming out, they are at this higher level, and we're going to replace that older person with this newer person who's supercharged. I mean, that's going to happen. So again, it's how do you use technology? How have we always used technology to better yourself, better your design, better your marketability? And so I think there's a bright future. I don't think there's anything to be pessimistic about. I believe it is about embracing it early, being a leader, and graduating as a leader to get that higher paying job right out of school.
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head, right? It's being that critical thinker, being that creative leader, that super great understanding of the aesthetic. Because when we started our careers, we usually probably had to slog from the bottom of doing all the production work that the people above us didn't want to do. And maybe it's okay that kind of method's in the past, and maybe they're going to leave school and go into the industry as that creative thinker and leader instead of doing that 10 to 15 years down the road. So I hope that's the case for them.
I think it can be. I think you could graduate creative directors. Wouldn't that
I
be
love that
a
idea.
wonderful thing?
I would love that.
You
Yeah.
walk right into a creative director job because all that other production stuff that was like I've done it. I could do it automatically now with automation, with AI, and now I'm thinking and selling myself as this higher thinker. That's what it's all about. So accelerate skills, accelerate your career, getting out of school, getting a higher paying job. This is happening with coding. It's always happening with coders, that they get these high paying jobs, and some don't even graduate from college. So why can't that happen now with graphic designers and UXers coming out of art school? it's leveling the playing field and evening out the disparity between the sanctity of people who code with higher level thinking designers moving into a workforce where there is no code, right? But user experience, that human-centered experience, is still at the center there, and that's the connection that we need. And I think this will dethrone the coders' kingdom that has existed for too long. And
I think you're right about that.
And so, let's go down that road. How do we become more important as designers than coders?
Yeah.
Right? Because if ChatGPT is going to be writing all this basic code and depositing it in GitHub, so why do I need you, Mr. Tech Person? And I love developers. I worked with many over my years, so I'm not trying to disrespect them, but there's always been this classic struggle between dev and design, and who leads that. And in the startup world, which unfortunately I've worked a lot in, it's always, dev is leading, and there's, a chief technology officer that has kind of defined the product, and you gotta break this mold and allow UX design to help determine that brand experience, because UX is brand is UX. That's a big line of mine. Is like, if you have a bad user experience design, that's a reflection of your brand. Yeah, people forget that. And so that is not lost in all this new technology, is that people still need to have brand experiences, and that encompasses so many things. And human-centered design is at the center of that brand experience. So I think there will always be a role for UX, and how do we supercharge these students so that they get that highest paying job possible when they get out of school? I think that's a great message to sell to school, and a great message to give to students who are about to graduate. And I know SCAT has a great placement program, so I'm really not worried about that. But you working with these kids, as freshmen and sophomores, juniors, seniors, how are you inspiring them and guiding them and giving them assurances that all this is worth it, and graduate, go the full march, embrace technology, and I am here, you are there to help them through. So kudos to you and what you're doing.
Thank you. Well, well, I can't wait to have you come visit, and I know that you'll be a great advocate, not just for AI, but for them as well.
Yeah, love to help. So we've exceeded our half an hour, but it's such a great conversation, and I hope you'll come back as this technology changes. We can get into more discussions on certain platforms. As Midjourney and the Discord relationship is ending. Midjourney is going to go solo, which I think will be mind-boggling when that happens. It's starting to happen right now. You can see the interface on Midjourney has changed. So, but lessons learned from what Adobe's doing, which is some fantastic user experience design in terms of how to not use prompting to get your results, your parameters, but you just check the aspect ratio that you want instead of writing in -- space AR. Took me a long time to
don't forget the space. One.
Yeah, it's like, oh my God, horrible interface. Anyway, so thanks, Lane. Really appreciate it. We'll have you back. And for those of you watching, thank you so much for your support of RealmIQ, and come back and watch more of RealmIQ sessions. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Curt. Bye.
Thanks, everyone. You can now catch RealmIQ sessions on your favorite podcast channels, including Spotify, YouTube, Amazon Music, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, and iHeart Podcast. Or listen to the full sessions at curtdoty.co/RealmIQ. If your company is interested in reaching an audience of AI professionals and decision makers to promote your event or product, we do have sponsorship opportunities. If you enjoy these discussions on AI, please push that subscribe button below. I'll see you in the next video.
RealmIQ. Book your corporate AI workshop today.
Subscribe to our Media Slam newsletter and learn more about the intersection of design, content, and technology.
CurtDoty.co. Branding, marketing, and product development.